Thank you for tuning in to MacroView Television and welcome to a brand new edition of Taiwan Outlook, the program that presents the different faces and lets you hear the different voices on Taiwan. I'm your host, Ray Guo. Have you heard of big data? What is it? And how does it change the way the government makes policy? Well, we're going to find out on today's program because we're delighted to have Dr. Ben Zhai, who's currently the CEO of Hope Bay Technologies here in Taipei, to talk about his knowledge about big data. Welcome to our program, Ben.
Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. First, I think a lot of people may know about you, Ben, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your education, your work experience, and the things that you have accomplished in the past?
Sure. I started working 30 years ago in my college sophomore year.
10?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it was in my sophomore year.
Okay.
I started working in a company that designs traffic signal control systems. So back then in Taiwan, most of the traffic signals were just running on timers.
Yes.
And we started designing a microcomputer-based system to have more intelligence in the traffic schedules.
Okay.
And then I designed the personnel safety system for the third nuclear power plant of Taiwan. Mm-hmm. After I graduated, I served in the military for 2 years, and in the meanwhile, designing their office automation systems and some education systems for the military. Then I went to New York, attending NYU for my PhD degree in computer science.
Good.
And my undergrad degree was actually in math, not in computer science, but it wasn't really by choice, because at the time, the government had a talented student program to bypass the college entrance exam.
Good.
So I did some work in the science fair and got selected. But in the end, they said, oh, we are picking scientific talents, not engineering. So I couldn't go to computer science or information engineering. And I ended up choosing math.
Good.
But it was a blessing in disguise, because the math training was extremely useful in my later years during my computer career. Mm-hmm. So after I went to the U.S., like the second half of the PhD program in computer science was all math, all pure algebra. It was good that I had the early trainings, because all my classmates who just went from College of Engineering into the program were suffering at the time.
Okay. Right.
But I never stopped working, because even when I was in the graduate school, I kept on working. So it took me 10 years to graduate from the PhD degree, because I've been working almost full time. And I designed some financial systems for Wall Street and some advertising systems for Madison Avenue.
In all different fields.
And then I finally got my PhD degree in 1999. I went to Bell Labs to work? Go back to research, actually, instead of doing consulting in the financial world. And I spent 4 years in the headquarters of Bell Labs, and I again learned a lot from the masters in that area. Then in 2003, I went to Google. Started as a software engineer, but then later switched to doing hardware, because Google, at the time I joined, had 700 people and a little over 200 were software engineers. So if I join them, I can contribute 1 out of 200. But Google had a lot of hardware, and I did have a lot of hardware experience, and they had no full-time hardware engineers. So I started with my colleagues building a hardware research department. And in the end, we accomplished quite a lot. In terms of saving energy, it's equivalent to creating a piece of forest the size of Taipei.
Okay.
So save quite some carbon for the world.
Imagine, yes.
Yeah, and then in 2010, I decided to leave Google and come back to Taiwan to join in the effort of building the new cloud computing industry in Taiwan. We had limited success in the first few years, and primarily because the direction was not clear to the government and to the industry leaders. They still thought it's a hardware-oriented business. They're just trying to sell more hardware, which was totally wrong. Cloud computing is a service business, not a hardware business. So finally, we decided to form our own company. It's not just my company. We had 29 founders. So it's rare for a startup to have so many co-founders because the team I built in Delta Electronics attracted quite some talents. And at the time, Delta decided to focus on their core business, which is power supplies. We decided that we should keep this going and try to persist through the end. And so the 29 of us came out, started our own business. That's the Hobei Technologies.
But it's now grown to be one of the more formidable pioneers in the field of cloud computing and big data?
Well, I wouldn't say formidable. That would be a little bit arrogant. But we try to do our best. And at this time, we have some pretty good products. And quite a few big distributors joined our rank and started selling our products. So that's good news for all of us. And right now, we still concentrate on cloud computing. We do some study in big data, but our business is not in big data yet because we do see that people misunderstood what big data is. Just like 5 years ago, they misunderstood what cloud computing is about. So of course, we're not ruling it out. We keep our eyes on it and keep trying to think what we can do in the field, but we don't just jump into it blindly.
And Ben, over the last few years, I think a lot of people have paid a lot of attention to both cloud computing and also big data. And like you said, maybe people have some misconceptions about what big data is. Since we have you on the program, can you then tell us what is big data?
Yeah, a lot of people misunderstood big data as just a lot of data.
Yes, a lot of numbers.
But if it's just the volume that's growing, then we have a very good tool to solve it. It's called Moore's Law. Moore's Law says your computing power doubles every 18 months. So you just wait, and you get bigger and better computers. You solve the problem with a lot of data. Right? But big data actually is a principle of computing. It's not a technique. A lot of people think, oh, I have Hadoop, we have MapReduce. It's a tool to crunch a lot of data. Therefore, we solve the problem of big data with that. No, that's not true. Those are just tools that enables you to process a lot of data. But how you process them is the key. And why you process them and you use them to do what. Those are the keys. So traditional data processing usually means, okay, I have a lot of data, I have a question to be answered, true or false. Whether something is bigger than this threshold or not, who's going to get elected, and so on. That's traditional data processing. Even if the volume is big, it's still not big data. It's just a lot of data. Big data means you don't even know what to look for. You have a lot of data there. You try to find the facts and rules within the data set. So it's not who's going to be elected. It's what caused a person to be elected. And then you look at the data, you see 50 different factors there, and you try to come up with the formula to say this combination of those 50 items decides who gets elected. You don't just look at the data and say, oh, he's going to win or she's going to win, and so on.
And over the years, people pay more attention to big data now, especially given what happened in Taiwan's mayoral elections last year. And what is the relationship then between big data and cloud computing? Cloud
computing is an enabler for big data because in order to process big data, you need a lot of computing resources. In the traditional info technology way, you have to buy those computers. Nobody rents you 2,000 computers for 5 hours.
No.
Okay. So only very few people have the resource, like at the state level or huge universities who can have a lot of computing resources and to let you use them for a short period of time. But with cloud computing, you can rent 2,000 computers, even for just 5 minutes. And you process your problem, and you shut them down, return them. That's it. That enables a lot of people to get started in the field of big data. And actually, it benefits not just big data, even traditional data processing, data mining, genomics. There are a lot of things that require huge amount of computing power just for a short period of time. Without cloud computing, it will be infeasible from the business sense to obtain such resources.
All right. And given the fact that there is that relationship between the two of them, how then besides the government, how can businesses also benefit from it? Okay, we have about 1 minute before the program.
Sure. For business to benefit from the big data study, first thing they need to figure out is what are the questions they are seeking answers for, and whether there is such a data set they can look into. Because most business want immediate return on their investment. So for scholastic researchers, they can say, oh, we just explore. So one day we'll find something interesting. For business, they can't do that. So most of the time, they need to, in advance, figure out, okay, we want to see what affects the sales of chocolate in this period of time. Then they get into the tools and find it and come out. So usually, they can solve small problems, not huge problems.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Ben, for that very comprehensive background analysis of what cloud computing is and also big data. We need to take the first break on our program today. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the second segment of today's program here on Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Ray Guo. We will continue our conversation with Dr. Ben Zhai, who's currently the CEO of Hopei Technologies here in Taipei. Ben, we were talking about the background, the knowledge that people need to know, the correct knowledge need to know about cloud computing and also big data, and what the relationship is between the two. We'll also talk a little bit about the application of big data in business and also in the government sector. And you mentioned briefly about the application that we have seen in last year's, in 2014, the mayoral elections around Taiwan. Can you then elaborate a little bit about how can we apply big data, a little wider, a little deeper in government policymaking? Please.
So I'll give you an example of the right way to use big data. A lot of people think, oh, we have a lot of data, we can predict who wins. That's not how it's used. For example, Mayor Ko, his team used big data to analyze what's the opponent doing, how are they attacking us. And so they found out a pattern of one of the attackers that they throw out a topic every 2 weeks on the clock. So they found out this pattern, so they can prepare in advance to respond. So the time is approaching, and the opponent releases a piece of news, they respond within minutes. And that's very effective tactic. And they found it by doing the big data analysis. So it's not using big data to say, oh, what demographic like us, and what age, and what area. Those are called statistics. Statistics is past facts. You know that already, doesn't help. You need to predict the future. So I say the biggest value of big data is to predict the future, to discover things that you didn't even think of.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The same thing applies to policy making. It should not be used to decide, whether we should build this railroad.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
You analyze traffic pattern and people's behavior, and you say, maybe we shouldn't build a railroad. Maybe we should fly more airplanes, or have more buses, or build more roads, or adjust the tax rates, and so on. So you analyze everything and figure out what to do, not whether to do this.
Okay.
So that would be the right way to use big data.
Right.
And unfortunately, today's government policy making, usually they look at the problem and say, we solved the problem by doing this, and then try to come up with supporting data to say, yes, we should do this. Okay. That's not the right way.
No, okay. But let's suppose if people like you continues to consult government, and the government policymaker is able to interpret big data in the correct way, would you think that continuing doing that will help the relationship between government policymakers and also the public at large?
Mm-hmm. I would say definitely it will.
Okay.
But they have to change their mindset from multiple choices to discovery mode.
Okay.
So it's not just, we have 2 or 3 choices, which one should we do, and start the debate and start the data collection. They have to, in advance, maybe a year or 2 or even more from the point where they need a solution, they start building the analysis and find out, there are so many ways to solve this problem, and which one has the least resistance and most benefit.
All right. But let me ask you, given what has transpired in the elections last year, has the government thinking been changed a little bit, becoming more, flexible, adaptive? Like you said, the mindset is now beginning to change.
Well, depending on your definition of a little bit.
Okay. Right.
I would say for 99.8% of the government officials, their mindset hasn't changed. Okay. They just say, we lost the election. How do we win it back? In the traditional sense.
Very traditional.
But there are a few quite influential people in the government already started thinking the new way to say, maybe we shouldn't just hold closed-door meetings for policy making. No. Maybe we should start talking to people. Maybe we should start collecting and analyzing more data.
Okay.
But those 0.2% is quite enough to start the trend.
Yeah, especially if they are in the key positions. And let me ask you this. There's a lot of data out there. Of course, that's what we call the big data. But how come this very small portion of the data out there that's being analyzed? My numbers tell me supposedly only 5% is currently being, plus or minus. Yes. And then we predicting by the year 2030. 2030, it's only going to be about 35%. That's still a minor portion of the total data available out there. Why is it? Is the trend likely to continue in the years to come?
Well, it's quite natural, actually. How many books do you have home?
A lot of books.
How many have you read?
I read maybe parts of them, all of them, at one time, but probably not going back.
Right. And that's you, right? Yeah. So all of the data have been read at least once.
Yes.
Otherwise, how are they collected, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
So all the data have been used in some way, but how much of it has been used to produce value? That's why you said maybe 5%.
Yes.
Okay. Out of your hundreds of thousands of books, how many have produced values for you?
Probably very little.
Right.
Yes.
So it's the same thing. It's nothing to be worried about.
Okay.
And you are a special case because you're a scholar, you read a lot of books. But for most people, they buy books and maybe they don't even read them.
I buy books because they look good on my shelf.
So it's natural and nothing to be worried about. Okay. Just for example, all the image data from all the geosynchronous satellites, there are already petabytes and petabytes of the data even before we started talking about big data. And NASA didn't actually analyze all of them.
No.
So a lot of the deep space probe data were not analyzed for 10 years. So they discovered something on Jupiter from the data on Voyager from 2 decades ago.
Yes, so but it still hasn't been explored.
Right. So nothing to be worried about.
All right, but Ben, let me ask you, if we continue down this trend, And the answer you give on this question may, depending on the case. But what is the general criteria that people use when they analyze data? The business decisions may be very different, the considerations, and the criteria for government policy making can be also a brand new set of considerations. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the general, interchangeable criteria that we see when analyzing big data?
I should say big data is not a set of data, right? No. And using the big data principle to process data usually involves data that you didn't think were very useful. Okay. And you try to find gold in a pile of garbage. Yes. And sometimes it does happen. Mm-hmm. And primarily because people didn't realize there's information in there. Mm-hmm. I usually categorize the usefulness of the data in 4 levels. Okay. Whatever you store, that's storage. Okay. If you can see what's in it, it's called data. Okay. And after you see the data, you realize what the data represents. Okay. That's information. All right. And then you look at the information, you realize how to use them. Mm. That's called intelligence. Okay. Okay. So you say a lot of data are not being used, right? That's just storage. They're just keeping them in archives. For safekeeping. Right. And as you move up this hierarchy, you find more and more use for the data. Okay. And the principle for big data processing, as I said, find a yes or no answer, but to find new rules that you never thought of. Okay. The yes or no answer is traditional statistics. Yeah. Big data, for example, in Facebook's data set, they found that the level of happiness in a person's posting, they can actually measure it by different words, right? So some words are happy, some words are sad. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the level of happiness in the posting is related to their relationship status. That's statistics. But they found out 20 days before they announced they have a relationship change, the emotion already started trending toward one way or the other. Okay. That's prediction. Yes. Prediction is what makes you money. Of course. So before they announced they move from single to in a relationship, 20 days before that, they can start pitching the right advertisements. And 3 days before that, they can say, do you want to buy a ring? Do you want to buy flowers, chocolate, and so on? That's precision marketing, which is very valuable. So it's not look at the statistic, it's find the new rules in the data set. That's the principle of big data processing. Okay, but let me ask you, you worked at Google before, but how widely spread is the precision marketing that you just mentioned among the businesses, especially in the US? They are actually very widespread right now because they all found that traditional marketing, they have a 0.2% return rate, response, right? Yes. But with precision marketing, you can get it up to 10%. So it's a 50-fold, significant jump. 50-fold improvement on your return of investment in advertising. All right. So of course, with 50-fold improvement, you have to pay maybe 5-fold more. In your expenses. But Ben, we're going to come back and we're going to ask you about the balance that we need, between the preservation of personal privacy, and also, on the other hand, the analysis of big data for public benefits. We need to take another break on the program. We'll be right back. Welcome back to today's program here on Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Wu Ruiguo. We will continue our conversation with Dr. Ben Zhai, who is a founder and also currently the CEO of Hopei Technologies here in Taipei, Taiwan. Ben, what we're talking about, the application of big data and cloud computing in business and also in government policy making. But one thing, a lot of people may ask you, I'm sure this is not the first time you're being asked the same question,
is that how do you then strike a balance between the protection of personal privacy on the one hand, also on the other hand, the application of big data or personal information even for the use of public benefits. How do you do that balance? Please.
Well, I would like to start with, I believe, what was said by Scott McNealy, who was the CEO of Sun, I think. He said, on the internet, you have no privacy, period.
Yes.
That's it.
Okay.
Anything you put onto the internet, you assume that the whole world has access to it. Yeah, that's it. If you don't want it to get out there, don't put it on the network.
Okay.
Of course, sometimes we have no choice because the government may have a mandate to say, okay, you have to do this and this and this and this through the network.
Okay.
Then they have access to it. Of course, we can come up with laws to limit what they can do about it and punish them when they break the law. It's really difficult to stop everyone from accessing the data. There's always someone who can come up with ways to access your data illegally.
Yeah, hack into it.
Yeah, there are hackers out there all over the place. Most of them are ethical, what we call the white hat hackers.
Yes.
Yeah, they say, oh, there's a problem here, let me point it out. But some of them are, well, less, with lower moral and ethics standards. But that's the fact of life. You're always going to encounter criminals out there in the world.
Everywhere you go.
It's just easier for them to access your stuff and more difficult to catch in the cyber world.
Okay, yes.
That's the fact of life.
All right.
And in the government, they access these personal data in the name of national security. Some of the people working on this truly believe that they do this in order to fight the enemy, in order to find the enemy.
Okay.
And of course, some of them may take advantage of this for their personal benefit.
Okay.
Still, that's a fact of life.
Yeah.
For any mechanism, there are people using them for the benefits of other people. There are people taking advantage of it. Just like taking the transit, some people try to not pay the fare, and so on. So
get it free.
I won't worry too much about it.
Okay.
As long as we have a good legal system that can stop the government when it breaks the law.
Okay.
That's what I worry about, because our legal system is not that good.
No.
So I think what we should do is fix the legal system, not fix the cybersecurity problem.
All right. And Ben, let me ask you, one of the hot topics in the last few years, regarding this issue of, protection of privacy and also public benefits, is Mr. Edward Snowden, who used to work for the, NSC in the U.S., and then also now he has revealed a lot of the classified, once classified information about what the government in the U.S. did or did not do. And what is your view on Mr. Snowden?
Well, first, I don't know him personally. He's not hiding in my place. But as I said, this is one of the possibilities that whoever's doing what they do should have considered and should have planned how to face the consequences. Any country is going to have spies from outside and spies from inside. Whether what he did is good or bad, well, I should say how much of what he did is good or bad, because we definitely know some of the things he did had bad influences.
Of course.
But at what level, only history can decide, because he's revealing some secrets of the governments, but his secrets have not been revealed. His motive, his method, and how long has he been planning on doing it? What kind of results actually came from what he did? It's going to take a long time to settle. So at this time, I would say it's still too early to say he's a saint or he's sinned, or he's a spy who should be shot, or he's actually the savior of us from evil governments. No, we don't know yet.
Okay, and I think a lot of people were shocked by the whole controversy surrounding Mr. Snowden, was the fact that very few people would expect the U.S. government will apply such techniques, to collect private personal information and translate it on a different platform, in the name of national security.
What, they were born yesterday?
But like you said, a lot of most of the governments will have to deal with this, in order to protect national security. But, if the trend continues, then, if, a place that, has a legal system that, really doesn't function very well, then how do you then suggest, for people who actually as a user or people who as a, supervisor of a certain system, how do they then oversee and make sure the whole process is protected and preserved?
Well, that's a tough question. I'm not running for president yet.
No, okay. We'll wait.
I can only say we do our best. Okay. And as long as there are a few people upholding their ideals, then justice will prevail someday. In today's political system, most people have some dirty secrets.
Of course, in the closet.
Yeah, and that's how they have the balance of terror towards each other. So no one would dare to insist on something so strongly that all the others will start digging his dirty secrets out.
Okay.
Only very few people can say they're clean all the way. In the history of Taiwan's politics, we did see a few, just very, very few of them. Okay. But usually they don't end up well. No. Because there is a famous ancient Chinese proverb, actually, not proverb, in Lao Tzu, his main book, 道德经.
Yes.
There's a proverb, 圣人不死，大道不止. Means if you don't get rid of the saints, you'll always get the bandits.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Because if someone starts holding extremely high moral standards on everyone else, nobody fits the bill. No. So they start rebelling and they say, I don't care. I won't be able to do that anyway, so why don't I just start doing whatever I want? Okay. So it's actually also not a good thing to say, okay, we want to hold everyone to the highest level of moral standard. Because everyone makes mistakes from time to time.
Of course.
We need to be tolerant towards those. Only when people realize that some dirty secrets are not actually so deadly, not so strong that would end someone's political career, when people realize that they're just the norm of the political world, then
not the exception.
Then people who have some dirty secrets will start daring, insisting on their ideals. Then we'll have a better world. Only after that, we'll have more people insisting on doing the right things.
Of course.
Without the fear of their dirty secrets being used to punish them.
Okay.
Then we can have a better political world.
Of course. And Ben, let's shift the focus a little bit. Then you will, of course, occasionally involved with government agencies on big data analysis and other issues. But let me ask you, what is, according to your knowledge, what is the extent of the application of big data in our government policy currently in Taiwan? You mentioned maybe only 0.2% of the government officials have slowly changed their mindset. But how about in terms of actually relying on the correct interpretation of the data out there for as part of the input into policy making?
At this time, even when the government is starting to change, they still haven't started implementing the new systems or the new mindsets.
All right.
So it's going to take a long time.
All right.
Usually when a revolutionary event happens and people start changing how they think, what they do, it'll take decades for things to really become popular. So just take personal computer as an example. At first it's like a toy. And then in 2 decades, people finally gave up mainframe computers. And even before that, when computers first came out, a lot of business governments still running on paper. So it took a long time for them to change. Okay. So the right way of big data mindset is just emerging. Okay. And using that to make policy will probably take another decade or so to become popular.
Really?
Because right now the infrastructure is not set to do such things. Okay. And even when they start to do it, it will be at its infancy. And it take two or three terms to mature. Okay. So, and we know each term is 4 years.
It's limited, running against time. All right. We need to take the final break in our program. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the final part of today's program here on Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Ray Guo. We'll continue and hopefully wrap up this fascinating conversation with Dr. Ben Zhai, who's a founder and also currently the CEO of Hopei Technologies here in Taipei, Taiwan. Ben will talk in depth about big data and cloud computing throughout the program today. In the final part, I'm going to ask you, one of the things that people think about application of big data in government policy making is, some of the routine work that government has to do. For example, census, we do that every 10 years. And also in regards to labor, statistics, and how can the big data help the government in terms of some of these routine work that government needs to do every year or every so often? Please.
Yeah, first thing they need to realize is that in the world of big data processing, we want the raw data, not the aggregated processed data. Oh, okay. So don't just give us the final statistics. Okay. We want everything from the beginning. Okay. And that is an important thing in finding the hidden patterns in the data. Not just give me the final answer. How many people are like this, are like that? What are the income brackets? What are the gender gap, and so on? No, we want the raw data to discover new patterns and new rules among the data set.
Okay, good.
Okay, so that's the first step.
Okay.
And then before you come up with a policy, you actually need to look at the data to see, what are the possibilities? Okay. I can't emphasize this enough, is don't just come up with a policy and then try to use the data to support your policy, because your policy is probably wrong.
Exactly.
And you're encountering opposition not because people don't like you, it's because your policy is actually wrong. So you need to look at all the possibilities and not just come up with what you think is best.
All right. And given the fact that I want to do a follow-up with what you just said, given the fact that we have all these data available out there, and if people continue to apply big data in the correct way, would you think that in the future for policy, policymakers or politicians, the room for error in policy making will be slowly, a little less, and then also becoming more shrink over time? And then people would not tolerate some of the mistakes that government makes or policymakers make, because you are interpreting, the public opinion or the big data in the incorrect way, coming out with policies completely going against the popular trend. What do you think?
Yeah. So in terms of policy making, there are different levels.
Yes.
Some are the little things that you say, and then people say, oh, that's wrong. And some are at a higher level that have very long-term effects. Affects a lot of people. And for the first kind, maybe it's not so stringent that you must use a very strong theoretical basis and data to support your decision. You can just look at the feedback quickly and adjust them as needed. But for the latter kind, you really need to have a lot of supporting data. A lot of times the lawmakers or policymakers are trying to, quote, avoid mistakes. As you said earlier, the room for error is getting smaller.
Yes.
The question is, what is an error? Okay. Just because people opposing it doesn't mean it's a mistake.
Okay. Yes.
As long as you have strong reason to support the policy you're coming up with.
Okay.
We know a lot of times the opposition come from pressure groups, not really from the general public. And today we have the tools in big data to tell you whether it's coming from just the pressure groups or it's actually from the general public.
Okay.
That's another thing about big data is you get more ways of collecting data.
Okay.
Just like before, when the government officials trying to make decisions on a policy, they hold a hearing or a series of hearings, public hearings. But how many people get to express their opinion there?
Very limited.
In each hearing, maybe 10, at most 20, and you held no more than 10 hearings for a policy, right?
Exactly.
So you only collect 200 pieces of opinions, and most of which are likely to come from pressure groups who are very good at grabbing the microphones at the hearings.
Be very vocal.
Yes. So today, with the network world, it's easy to collect more opinion from the general public. Then you have a better understanding of what people are thinking and talking about.
Okay. Good.
That's another way of looking at big data is that it has so many more new sources of information.
Yeah, exactly. And we understand, as you mentioned earlier, that, Ben, we're not likely to see the application of big data into actual government policy for some time.
Well, actually, what I say is widespread use in policy making. It may take 2 or 3 terms to really get popular.
Okay.
But when are we going to see the first application? Well, probably in a year or 2 we're going to see it.
That's exactly my question. When do we likely to see the groundbreakers in government policy making by using big data analysis?
We know government work in units of years, right?
Okay.
They come up with the budget for the year, then they have to execute that budget for the next year.
What they can do.
So they come up with new ideas now. It's going into the budget for not next year. Next year's budget has been decided in July, so it's passed.
Okay.
So unless they've already done something there or they reserve the room to do it, otherwise we won't see it next year. But hopefully, with the agility of some of these new local governments, we may be able to see some of the initiatives next year.
Okay.
And then the year after that, we should see quite a few.
Okay. And what will be some of the potential groundbreakers that we're likely to see? For example, infrastructure, or is it going to be in terms of transportation, in terms of environmental protection? What would be the general area that you think will most likely to be the area for potential groundbreaker?
Well, that's a good question. I would say in the area of smart city, that's a big umbrella, which just means you use IT technologies to solve the daily problems in the city.
Okay.
But a lot of people are using it as a marketing term now to sell whatever they want to sell.
Yes.
But in terms of building a smarter living environment, like U-Bike or public transportation, parking space planning, those are the easier parts to first come up with something that you utilize existing data to analyze. Traffic patterns, so adjust the traffic signals, and adjust the on-ramp control of highways. Those are most likely going to be applications in those areas are likely to be created fairly soon.
Okay. And do you think now with more and more application of big data in government policy making, maybe in the future that big data would dictate how government makes policies? Do you foresee that to be a possibility?
No, actually, I always think what dictates the government policy making is stupidity.
Okay, all right.
But,
that will make you a lot of friends. Yes, all right.
Well, it's not just our government. Governments around the world,
all
it's
over.
the same.
All right.
But,
you're making more friends now. Okay.
Okay, that's a joke. But I wouldn't say big data is going to dictate policy making because most of the policies don't have enough data to back them up, and have not been. There have not been enough data collected to help making the policies. So it's not going to dictate policy making. Maybe even in, as I say, in a decade or so, maybe 20% of the policies can get help from big data. But most of them are still intuition. It's more an art than science.
All right. And for the business sector, what will be the area of application of big data in the future, in the next few years? You already talked about precision marketing. Anything else that you see on the horizon?
Oh, for the business world, there are a lot more that can be used. Precision marketing was just the beginning. Then manufacturing control, how to get better yield in our assembly lines. And consumer trends, not just marketing, but also actually deciding what to make. People are already building applications to analyze the cyber sentiment to say, oh, do people like white or red or black next year? So we can make more of them. And that reduces waste. So it's actually good for environment too. And food trends, what kind of flavors should be produced next year. And tracking the environmental changes, that's both useful to the government and to the private sector. What should I grow next year in the agriculture area? All of those can benefit from big data analysis.
Okay. Finally, we have about 1 minute left in the program, Ben. There could be a lot of young people out there watching our program today. They certainly enjoy your conversation. And then, given the fact that, you have been involved in IT business for many, many years, if they are thinking that, hey, what Ben does is very cool, I want to do the same thing in the future, what would be your recommendation to them?
First, I would say you need to keep your horizon broad. Don't just jump into one field and be very specialized in that field. You need to learn from a lot of different fields because future applications are always going to be cross-disciplinary. So if you just know one thing, you can't be very good at it, very good at creating new values. So of course, you also need to be good at one thing at least. 胡适先生, he said, 为学有如金字塔, 要能广大, 要能高. So what you study should be like building a pyramid. You need a broad base, and then you're very good at something, so you have the height. That is how you build your achievement. Don't just jump into one thing, become a needle, and don't just touch everything. And don't just touch everything without going into the details, so you become a plate. So don't be a plate, don't be a needle. Try to be a pyramid.
Exactly. That's very sound advice. And certainly being a pleasure to have you on the program today, Ben. Want to wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for watching our program today. I'll see you next time on MacroView Television. Thank you very much.